Thanks, Ron. Yeah, so you'll have to excuse me a little bit. I might be a little slow today because it was my retirement party last night. And yeah, so I was an architect for a local telecom company, and I learned all sorts of really interesting things about how the telephone network works, and experienced a lot of things as well, like robocalls and telephony denial of service attacks. How many of you here know what a robocall is? How many of you have had a robocall? Okay, so for those of you who don't know what a robocall is, it's like those weird calls that you get from random numbers or local numbers that sound kind of like this. Congratulations, you've won a cruise, and then you hang up. So that's, I'm gonna kind of show you guys how that works and how they're making money off of it, and potentially how we can stop it. So just a disclaimer here, basically don't use any of this knowledge for nefarious purposes, and if you do, don't blame me, okay? So what's the problem? A lot's changed in the telecom industry over the last, I'd say, decade even. And it's kind of created an environment where it's inevitable that we all get these robocalls. The change in the environment is this. Telecom is now cheap, right? It costs pennies or fractions of pennies a minute to send calls out to the public services telephone network. Calls are now automatic. So you can plug, I'm actually going to demonstrate for you guys today. You can take a script and generate a bunch of calls to people's cell phones. I'm going to need some volunteers later. Calls are now anonymous. So the telephone network used to be tightly controlled, so you kind of had a pretty good idea who was calling you. There were people who could get around it, but it's way more pervasive now. Oh, here we go.
Happy birthday.
Cheers. Oh, thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you, Ron. Thank you. All right, where was I was right at anonymous, right, anonymous. So, yeah, actually part of my demonstration, you're gonna get a call from 204-555-1111, and it's pretty easy. So the other part of it that you don't experience with robocalls, well, I guess it is kind of persistent, is that because it's automated, because it's cheap, because it's anonymous, it can easily be persistent. And my demo is gonna show you how bad that is. It basically stops you from using your phone. If you know what a denial of service attack, that's exactly what it is. It stops you from using your phone. So for a personal user with a cell phone, not a big deal. You know, you turn it off for a while until they go away. But if you're a business and this guy's hitting you for 5 days and then calling you on your personal phone and extorting you for 10K, I mean, that's kind of bad, right? And there's no way to stop it right now. So I like to do a little bit of a history lesson and just show how we got here. I've already touched on it a little bit, but many years ago, the telephone network was more tightly controlled than it is today. It was a person calling another person. The caller ID wasn't settable. The PSTN, that's the Public Services Telephone Network, basically the telephone network, would set the caller ID for every call that would go out. And it was tightly linked with the source of the calls at that point. Nowadays, sort of later on, people started lighting up PBXs, or public branch exchanges. These are these multi-line telephone systems that are typical in offices and things like that. They started getting, big trunks into the telephone network, and they started demanding features from the telcos, saying, hey, right now, whenever anybody from our organization makes a call to the outside world, those calls all appear as the same number. We want, if Joe calls somebody to show up as Joe's number, or Bob calls someone to show up as his number. Telcos are like, okay, can we charge you for it? And they're like, yeah, okay, perfect, deal. Not really thinking of the implications, of course, right? So what actually happens then is the telco has to let the PBX tell it what the caller ID is when it's sending the call out. Ah, no problem with that. At least at the time, because, well, the telcos were charging an arm and a leg for this service. So, not your everyday Bob could just go and change his caller ID. He had to have a serious deal with the telco. And then they connected PBXs to the internet. Great idea. Actually, for the people who did it, it was a great idea. They started making bank because they had these big trunks into the telephone network, which they could set anything on. And then they're like, oh, well, I also have like this internet connection. Why don't I just like connect the two and then start selling telephone service and, become a competitor for the telco? Awesome. I'm going to use their infrastructure to beat them at their own game. Sounds like a great idea. And so what happened is because there's so much competition for these trunks, the price started going down, but also they started selling end user telephone service, and then eventually they started selling, anybody who wants a telephone over the internet. Like, all you need is a credit card and you can generate or steal those easy enough. And as the no, I don't do that. Yet, anyways. I did retire, right? No. So basically that made the caller ID settable and cheap, and that created the situation where we are now, where almost anyone can sign up for an account that allows them access to one of these things that allows them to set their caller ID, name display, and achieve relative anonymity as long as they know how to use someone else's credit card. So you can imagine that there are many people doing this. And this is the architecture of the attack. Basically, this is me. This is my laptop right here, and I'm going to show you this. I run a Java application that I wrote, which uses some libraries, but basically what it does is it sets up a connection to a VoIP provider or many VoIP providers. One thing I did notice is that a lot of the VoIP providers that I could get a hold of are semi-legit businesses who they try to stop VoIP attacks, at least they make efforts. So I could only generate 2 concurrent calls to the same phone number from my computer, which kind of frustrated me initially until I realized that most VoIP providers have 30, 40 points of presence all over the world, and they don't always talk to each other. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to download a list of all your points of presence, and I'm just going to randomly hit them, and then I can generate 40 or 100 calls or whatever I want, and there's no blocking it. So the application evolved as I was trying to figure this out. But anyways, so you connect to these VoIP providers. They give you the connection to the international telephone network. And from there, the calls go out. Now, if I was an actual black hat and trying to make money off of this and extorting businesses, I probably wouldn't use legitimate ones. There are plenty I've heard of in countries that don't cooperate. So this is one of the problems in the telecommunications industry is that tracing these calls, as soon as you get outside of your country, it becomes so hard. And even if you get to the source country, probably the source country is like Uzbekistan, and their cops are going to be like, what do you mean telephone network? Or their telco is actually incentivized through payments to hide the attackers. Good. So I need 2 volunteers, and people, okay, you, and come up here with your cell phones. We're going to show everyone what happens. One more. Yeah, real cell phone. Okay, come on up here. Don't worry, there's no permanent damage. I swear. As long as I turn it off after, right? 2 shots of Yag. All right, here we go. So I need you to type your number in here, just after the 204. Now, it is a live demo. I hope it works. I was a little drunk when I set this up, so, no guarantees. And as soon as I start this, what I want... oh, you're not a 204. Hopefully this works. The suspense is killing me, guys. Is that the right number? Because it's gonna fuck up if it's not a real number.
450.
Oh, pardon the language.
450
286 409. Okay, I think we're good. It is really cold in here. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you what's going to happen first. You probably already read this, but I like to talk. Basically, I'm going to send just a single concurrent call to each of you. Your phone's going to start ringing. It's going to have a weird-ass caller ID. And I want you to answer it, but then it's going to hang up on you. And then it's going to call you again, and you can ignore it, or you can answer it. The idea here is they can't really use their cell phone for anything else while I'm doing this, until, of course, 2 shots of Yag make their way up here. So, are you ready? Okay. I got lots of time. I only had 7 slides, and this is number 6. So, I kind of figured I'd talk more, but being tired from retiring kind of made me lose some of my storytelling, and I'm just filling here for, Okay, I'm going to break your phone now. Here we go. I'm hitting play. And it's Java, so, Is it ringing?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the caller ID on there?
555-1111. 555-1111.
All right. Okay. Oh, but I can change that.
Yeah, call ended.
All right. Yours isn't working?
It's coming, yeah. 204 555 1111.
Yeah.
All right. I did randomize it, but I got weird results because I guess they want real area codes or something. It's another check they run. So, future reference. Is it still going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So every time I hang up, it's just calling back. Every time I'm hanging up, it's just calling right back and...
Yeah. Okay, and it's done.
Yeah.
So I only... Thanks. Okay, so I was DOSing my cell phone and my girlfriend's cell phone, and it stopped working for some reason, and I eventually realized that my router kept crashing because I couldn't ping it, and I don't know why doing a telephony denial of service attack over my Shaw router crashed it, but they're doing something weird. Anyways, so I did it over my cell phone, and it handled it no problem. So apparently my cell phone's more powerful than my Shaw router. So, and this is where somebody in the room's probably gonna troll me, but don't be so glum. There is hope. I don't know if you all remember the 90s. I kind of remember the 90s a little bit. But we used to get a lot of spam, right? Like, you guys remember, 100 spam messages a day in your inbox? Because there's no filters or anything. Eventually, we kind of figured out how to block that using, analysis and pattern recognition and gray listing, where you'd put a message into holding pattern until you knew it was a good one. Well, we can actually do some of the same tactics with the telephone calls, with the telephone network. And so my proposal, and I've sent this actually to the CRTC because they actually asked for proposals. My proposal is this: listen, inside Canada, we can control the calls, and we can kind of control the quality of the calls relatively easy. Like we did, those robocalls in not the last election, but the previous one. We actually found the guys. I mean, it never went to prosecution of the people who really should have been paying for it, but hey, whatever. There was a fall guy, so, job done. So we have effective control to trace and prosecute perpetrators within the country. So we're good there, right? Most of the problem, though, is coming from outside of the country, right? Like I said, Uzbekistan. I just like the word. It's not actually from Uzbekistan. So don't quote me on that. But so what I'm proposing is kind of like a firewall around Canada. And this would take... No, I'm not Donald Trump, okay? It's a little more arcane than a firewall, but it kind of does the same thing. What it would do is it would require all of the telcos to work together and collaborate and build a system that filters international calls. Yeah, I know, it's unrealistic, okay? But a guy can dream, right? Yes, collaboration across the industry. Isn't that what the CRTC is supposed to create? I don't know. Anyway, so if you think of a telephone call like an email, like really it is. It's just a message that's coming from somebody outside of the country that says, hey, this person wants to call this person and they're going to come in on this trunk. And you can say, fuck off. Or you can say, oh, yeah, I know you, I trust you, yeah, come on in, come on in. But, like, if you're getting, like, calls from an international telco where the source caller ID is 204-555-1111, I kind of think you should drop those. Just, you know, my opinion. But can you port your number outside of the country? No, I don't think so. But I understand that, like, for example, Skype, right? You can put your own caller ID on Skype and make calls, but that's originating from the U.S. However, we could build rules that say, okay, well, we know and trust Skype. We know where they're coming from. We'll allow those calls through, right? The thing is, there's no information being gathered and analyzed, and we need to start doing that in the same way that we did with spam, so that we can stop all of these crazy calls. I got 5 minutes. Who wants questions?
So I've noticed with a lot of robocalls, instead of getting 1204 whatever, it's often stuff like 12 space 04 space whatever.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're doing. It's just bad scripting. Like a lot of these guys are like 12-year-olds who started their online business, you know, and just know stuff, but not a lot of stuff. Anyone else? Come on, where's the troll? Oh. Yes, sir.
So a lot of the spam calls we get are not just the 204, but the next three digits are actually within our company.
So that's kind of like, okay, so the question was, the calls actually look like they might be coming from our own company. Now, there was a guy who had a talk on DNS earlier, and he was talking about how you just make micro changes in the URL to trick people. It's like a social engineering technique, right? Like, I can send you an email that looks like it comes from your CEO, and you're going to open that attachment because I want that TPS report right now, man. Right? So it's social engineering. So it just makes you answer the call. You're more likely to answer it if it's a familiar number. They're getting inside people's heads, right?
So even like a small company, shouldn't the local telephone company
Well, you can say it.
shouldn't it be more obvious to them that
They're not looking. Nobody's looking. Right? I think AT&T has started looking in their defense. Like they did actually, like some independent guy wrote some piece of software that I think they're using that's similar to this idea, but predominantly nobody's looking because they actually make money off these calls. I don't know if you know that, but you know when people use the network, they make money. So yeah. There's absolutely no incentive for them to protect us from this, unless we make them have incentive by, you know, leveraging our government and CRTC and, you know, I'm not going to say something silly like call your minister or something, but hey, you're free to do what you want. Any other questions? Oh, in the back there. It looks like the call is coming from them. Then they're blacklisted. Well, yeah. So this is part of the problem, right? Like, I remember when I first started getting robocalls, I would just blacklist them, and then I realized the number was always changing. How many of you have had someone call you and say, "Hey, did you just call me?" Yeah, a couple people. Yeah. Yeah, and I've actually heard of some pretty crazy things where like highly secure numbers have been called and they call back the number that was somebody else and they're like, "We're going to get lawyers after you. You're not supposed to call these numbers." And like it just turned into, a snafu, right? So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Uh-oh.
What about PBXs that have been blocked?
What do you mean?
Well, like local PBXs in the community, like Canada or wherever they are. How does this Star Wars defense system around Canada play into that?
So part of what going back a little bit, I talked about, not this last election, but the previous one where there were all the robocalls sending people to the wrong polling stations, and Elections Canada got involved in the RCMP, and there was a big investigation, and we found the guys.
Sorry, I came in halfway.
Okay, yeah. So we have control over the local environment due to the fact that we actually have power and enforcement, and we can tell the telcos, we need this data, we need it now, and we're tracing this, and we're finding the guys. You can't do that outside your borders because of the whole sovereignty thing. Thank you. Okay, I need more alcohol. Thank you, everyone. Good night.